It was the first Terminator movie, I think. Arnold Schwarzenegger dropped out of the sky, naked, onto the pavement, with no resources and no idea what's going to happen. That's why I'm calling myself the Naked Blacksmith. I've played with metal all my life, but I've never actually beaten heated metal on an anvil. So in this video, I want to share with you the basics that I've had to learn and the very basics of the tools that I've needed to make or modify to get myself started. The first thing is the hammer. There's different types of hammer, but the most common one you'll need is a rounding hammer for roughing out with a flat face for finishing off, or plenishing as they call it. I bought myself a $10 3-pound club hammer, the kind of thing you use for putting in tent pegs. It's a cheapie. I've had it for years. The handle does slip out of the head quite regularly and I have to bash it on things to get it back in. And not being like a traditional wooden handle, it's pretty much unserviceable. You can't really fix these things. It really is a shit hammer. The next job on this will be to make myself a nice stout handle, a little bit longer, and pull this one out and replace it. You'll see the hammer handle making in another video. But the two most common types of hammer that a blacksmith uses are a rounding hammer and a plenishing hammer. So this is the two in one. It's a little bit rough because I've had it for 10 years or so. It's been used for all sorts of different jobs. But I've given it a dress up on my homemade linisher and removed the sharp bevels that were on the edges because they only bruise and damage the metal, and I've replaced them with a nice gradual radius that will stop it biting in and leaving marks. The other kind of hammer that I'm going to be needing is a cross-peen hammer. That comes down to more of a taper and it's flattened off on the horizontal plane so that you can really get into corners with it and do the same as a rounding hammer but on a smaller scale. Just for use for drawing out metal. It will heavily bruise it and push it out in the direction that you move the hammer. You can move it towards you or you can move it away from you just with subtle hammer blows. Here's a cross-peen hammer that I have, but it's quite light. I paid $29 for this. That is a $15 US second-hand hammer, which is a little bit pricey, but it's got a nice long handle and it will be useful for smaller blacksmithing projects. But I'm going to make a bigger version of this out of another one of these. Once again, that's going to be the subject of another video.
And now a word from our sponsor, Tutto Retro Lollies, makers of Russian fudge. Just kidding, just kidding. Damn nice fudge though. Now, mild steel, when it's heated to forging temperature, has got pretty much the same consistency as Russian fudge. So, I've cleaned my anvil top and my hammer with acetone, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how metal moves when you smack it with a big hammer when it's hot. Bang! Now there you go. Now that's a big bruise left by the rounding end. You can see how it's moved the material off to one side and out into one corner. And now, with the square face, I can just gently move it around and bring it all back into the original shape that it was before, because we're only moving metal, we're not removing it. So there you go. Back to its original shape again, with no loss. The only loss that you'll get from forging is the thin scale that forms on the surface with each heat. What I'm doing now is showing you how, with the rounding end, you can quickly draw down the material into a taper or a spike. As you get down to a thinner diameter, the effect is more aggressive, so you have to really slow down and be extra careful as you get towards the tip. But where you've got plenty of material, you can do huge, big, heavy whacks to start it moving, and then you finish it off with the flat plenishing side. Once you've made a four-sided spike, you can turn it into an octagon spike, and then roll it back and forth and smooth out those 8 sides to give you a nice round taper. And back to its original square shape again. Right, now this is, I think it's called the upsetting table. No, not the upsetting table, the offset table. That's it. It allows you to put a sharp crease in your work for when there's, like on tongs, where there's a change in the material's direction. It gives you the initial step with one good hard whack down on there, gives you a definite step that you can then enlarge by putting it over the side of the anvil and knocking it out to the depth that you need. And just to finish off, you saw me using the horn to form a ring. Now, hammer welding, fire welding, forge welding, it's all the same thing, but you'll need a flux, something to keep the oxygen away. Borax is a dirt cheap, easy to use flux. It comes in granules, it's cheap, you can get it at the hardware store. And what you do with the flux is, first you prepare your metal. Let's say you want to add some hard facing, or you want to double the thickness of a piece that you're working on. You can weld another piece to it by putting it in the forge and bringing it up to a very high white hot heat, and then sprinkling the flux on it, put it back in the forge to melt the flux, and then you do this one simple trick. You whip it out of the forge super fast, fold it over onto itself, and give it just a light hammer. Doesn't take much at all. Because it's white hot, it will melt together and become one. You then hammer it into the shape desired, and you've got either a piece of hard facing, or you've got a new piece that's thicker than you started with before. I'm invoking the 5-second rule. You know I'm still going to eat it, don't you? Now, just a quickie to finish off. Gloves. You can use all sorts of gloves, but I use double-lined welder's gloves. They don't get a lot of use until now, but they're really high-quality gloves, and they're going to save my pinkies. They're expensive, but worth it. You could do what I do, you could do what I do, and that's dip them in water so that it's wet and stays cooler for longer. You could use gardener's gloves as well, or rigger's gloves. Anything's better than nothing.